Today I want to talk about something a little personal and maybe even a little silly, but which may be the absolute key to you relating better to others, understanding people better, winning more arguments, getting your way more often, and being happier in life. Kind of a big promise for a very simple thing, but hopefully I can deliver on that promise. See, I'm delivering this video while I'm on a trip with my family, and one of the wonderful things about being a father, aside from getting to know an amazing little person who loves you and relies on you like nobody else in the world ever will, aside from that, one other amazing thing is you get to see a little mind develop, and you get to see all the little steps that you took as a kid that you take for granted now. Because the fact is, everything, or virtually everything that we do is learned. I mean, we come out of the womb basically being able to breathe, cry, and eat, kind of. Everything else beyond that, we really have to learn. You had to learn to walk, you had to learn to talk. Now, most people do learn these things, but it just goes to show that nothing is easy, nothing is simple, and nothing should be taken for granted. So the people I'm on this trip with are mainly from cities, and we're in kind of a rural area where there are water towers everywhere. And it's really interesting because some people on the trip who are very smart have no idea why water towers exist. A lot of them think it's just for water storage, which doesn't really make sense. If it's just for storage, why would you pump the water way up high? And this just highlights the point. If you know the answer, it seems obvious. If you don't know the answer, it's completely baffling until you find out the answer, at which point it seems obvious. But to take it for granted that someone knows that would be a bad thing to take for granted. To take it for granted that someone doesn't know that would be a poor assumption as well. Depending on the experience you had throughout your life, but particularly at a young age, the things that you do take for granted may be very different than what somebody else does. So for example, a skill you learned as a young child, somebody else may never have learned. Someone who lives on a farm growing up would learn very different things than someone who lives in a city growing up. And neither one is necessarily better or worse, they're just drastically different. But the things that you take for granted, someone else might not. Each and every single person in the world assumes different things, has different givens and things they take for granted, has different understandings of the world. And most of the time, when you're in a debate with someone that gets really heated, it's not actually the argument itself that is contentious. It's the underlying assumptions. When two people have assumptions coming into an argument and both of them are so fixed that they're taking them for granted and they're not even subjecting the assumptions to argument, then you just end up with two people butting heads and no progress being made, and people just get angry, people just fight, relationships are destroyed, etc. So let's take a particularly controversial current event as an example. Let's talk about global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it. This is definitely a heated issue where there are people who believe very strongly one way, believe very strongly the other way, and people are very firm in their positions.
Our generation has been told time and time again that our lives do not matter and we have no historical purpose. We are out here today proving that wrong.
School kids led the charge, walking out of class, demanding world leaders take action to prevent further global warming and climate change.
You have people who truly believe that this is an existential threat, that this is likely to be the thing that essentially might wipe out humanity. If you believed those things, you would probably believe strongly, and if you believed it's an existential threat to humanity, you'd do almost anything to get your way, and you would probably think other people are evil.
Greta Thunberg and anyone younger, they live in the best environment that has ever existed for human beings. From a human perspective, there's never been a world that's more nourishing, more safe, more full of opportunity, and fossil fuels are fundamental because they've given us the power to transform the naturally deficient and dangerous environment into an unnaturally abundant and safe environment.
Every little natural disaster that happens, like fires in Australia or fires in Northern California, they blame it on global warming. They blame it on climate change.
If, on the other hand, you looked at the data and you didn't really believe it, and you said, look, we've had a lot of different changes in global climate, a few degrees or fractions of degrees here and there. I don't think it's going to make a big difference overall. The climates have changed and fluctuated all over the place throughout history, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that there's strong enough evidence to be overhauling entire industries and costing tons of jobs and creating, inefficiencies economically that are hurting tons of people and even killing people in terms of their way of life and different things like that. Now, if you believe that and you see people trying to push what you consider to be drastic measures on you, you'd probably have a lot of opposition. And in particular, if it's going to directly impact your job, your way of life, your economy, et cetera, you have a very strong reason to stand up and oppose. Neither one of these positions is evil. Both positions are trying to do what is best for the world, themselves, humanity, the people they love, the earth in the long run, etc. Okay? And if the positions are, I'm just going to attack you and you're just going to attack me, and we are at an impasse no matter what, no progress will be made. So what we need to do instead of fighting is actually do a better analysis of the data, do a more compelling analysis of the data, because even if you believe it strongly, if half of the world doesn't believe whatever you believe, obviously you need to come up with something more compelling, otherwise there's going to be a lot of fight, there's going to be a lot of resistance, and you're not going to get your way anyway, no matter how hard you do fight. So focus on persuading, focus on thinking and analyzing and getting to the assumption that is different. That's where the dialogue should be, not on the attacks. Because when you start attacking people and start getting attacked back, what does that do? That doesn't make people come to your side. That makes people more firmly entrenched on their own sides, and that takes us further from an agreement. So again, this would be a moment to step back, take a breath, and think about what are your assumptions? Are they valid? What are the other side's assumptions? To what extent may they be valid? And also, if you assumed the things the other side assumed, how would you go about needing to be persuaded? And focus on persuasion rather than attack.